I'm Ryan O'Doud, and you're listening to Ryan's Audiobooks on the Issues Magazine channel on YouTube. We're continuing the Psychic Bible, the apocryphal scriptures of Genesis P-Orridge, and the third mind of the Temple of Psychic Youth. Today is section 1.5, and we'll be reading the whole of Temporary Temple 2 from the book. Time is an infinite consciousness, often mistakenly named God. Time is omniscient, omnipresent, and neutral. We ourselves are brief physical manifestations measuring our self-importance against time. From time we come, and into time we return. It seems that most mystical faiths, occult systems, religions, God-people beliefs become clearer and easier to follow if we substitute the word time for the being, entity, almighty, adhered to as the infinite in various group systems. The way of the TOPI nomad is to focus upon time itself as the amorphous consciousness containing all histories, presents, and futures. Clues. In the Black House, two voices contradict, each as hybrid as the other. The banality of caring for style reveals a parable of transient commuting that revels in trivia. The function of words to devalue vision and emasculate meaning flows through the digestion of popular culture. The ability of words to describe no thing accurately. Time convulsing as flesh makes real desire. The body focused as a vessel for transmission of guilt and engrams. Behind thought is a series of masks that mouth simple platitudes like E-L-O-V-U. Demand. More of everything for everybody, money for everyone. Result. Our aim is wakefulness. Our enemy is dreamless sleep. The process is the product. Section break. Begin. Title: Temporary Temple. Species. Oral History. Research Project. Cultural Engineering. This event was initiated by the Gray Organization and John Zoskia Gosling on Saturday, July 28, 1984. It took place in a derelict circular synagogue in Drayton Park, London, disunited queendom. Psychic Youth volunteers squatted the venue temporarily. They swept, cleaned, removed trash, sealed broken windows, repaired toilets, and set up a drinks and food area. A TOPI banishing ritual cleansed it of previous deities and inherited belief systems. Psychic Youth incense was burned and hundreds of candles were lit. An electricity generator was hired, borrowed video monitors were installed in pyramid banks on three-tiered choral stage, and a PA system was rented. Invitations were passed out by hand only, discreetly, as small as business cards, dark gray on gray. A secret howl in the ambient night, calling in the growing pack of wolves. On the night of the ritual, several hundred psychic youths and individuals of the Lost Tribe from the original first wave of this movement came out of the shadow. Many are still active in creative and spiritual arenas. Others have faded back into their social models, distracted, disillusioned, or simply destined. So easy to burn out, lose your nerve, and shy away from that leap into the abyss. Such a loss to miss the exhilaration of the fall into primal darkness, the original sanctuary before even sense of self. There were several police visits. Suspicious. They were told we were making a program about youth in an unspecified future time. Post-apocalypse for Channel 4, a nation's strength lies in its psychic youth. It would take hours for them to thoroughly confirm or deny this tale. If you release an action, it will unfold. Old TOPI proverb. So it happened. All present agreed. A unique ritual from the street of the temple, from the mountains to the ancient stones. A clarity of purpose. A unity of intent manifested in a most inappropriate yet absolutely profound situation, strange and very special. When an idea of an occult warrior underground, a chance to fight in the old ways, using contemporary tools and symbols, still seemed powerfully real and potent. Before, the heavy hand of chance and will was burned with a fire of betrayal and exhaustion. Yet looking into them, now, next, there is still an unfolding, a scent of those dispersed circling ever nearer the center once more. We live as ever in a time of sneering ridicule and self-abuse. The spew age entraps the fearful in the chamber of the rapist, turning the learning process of past into a bondage process of a present, preventing the next from ascending. Those who try are seen as weak, those who hide are seen as strong, those who forgive are seen as blocked, those who run are acknowledged as aware, those who care are seen as enemies, those who exploit inner pain are seen as love. Each Waira seems castrated, blinded by the light, afraid of the sanctuary of night. The imprint now is compete, not complete. To refuse is to be punished. The word no brings wrath. Permission is equated with freedom. To explore consciousness remains a blasphemy, an absolute rule of the total internal death of self, respect, and hope, replaced by a glorification of self-centeredness. In the land of the inadequate, all are numb. At 2 a.m., the police finally raided. The temporary temple had already risen in a cone of flame and released its energy into all. Material traces and detritus had been erased. Not but a few entranced stragglers remained by the entrance. This was a mystery playing. There were no pieces of music within this project, only an ebb and flow of sound that tolls gently over an era. Genesis P-Orridge, November 1987. London, June 1993, California. Section break. I continue. Revealed manifestation. The temporary temple, a manifestation that revealed and refined many aspects of the shamanistic qualities that make up the pagan nature. The destruction of inhibition and fear brought it down upon as we are brought up. Everyone present was actively colluding in a ridicule of bourgeois order and celebration of the ecstatic. Those administering sound sources acted merely as catalysts to allow everyone present, themselves included, to become part of a transcendental moment. Ego forgotten, the situation transient, but of the ecstasy and experience fixed in our unconscious forever. From the obvious, birth to death, all is temporary, seems temporal, but this is a transitionary moment. This event had no bounds in time. We looked in the mirror of ourselves and our being gathered together, a new release from the programmed form of entertainment that we usually receive. We were indeed present at a temple, at a triumph of the flesh, a sacred forbidden place, quite literally, where the spirit flowed like sexual fluid for our beings. A chantry of our minds chanting the same human desire to break the bounds of temporality, the split that serves society's controlling purpose, being a step onto the path of magical practice. Revere this night. Brother Malik, November 1987, TOPY Steel. Section break. I continue. Levels of meaning in the Temple of Psychic Youth. 4 facts. 1. Possibility. It is real. 2. Clarity. It is unique. 3. Certainty. It is known. 4. Intimacy. It is immediate. Demystification. Demystification means not taking anything for granted, whether that may be your living situation, philosophical point of view, or state of mind. We generally don't stop and question ourselves very much about what we are attempting to do. Nevertheless, the beliefs that we hold dear are highly suspect. A belief could be any part of awareness that we simply let operate without attention. There is always a lot of background stuff taking place. When you look at this page, sign your name, walk up a flight of stairs, or get into an argument, most of what you are doing is shunted outside your awareness. Many of the processes that make us go on as we all do will never be in our attention for our entire lives. We forget a lot of the past, we are confused about the present, and we are ignorant about the future. Demystification means examining all of that. It also means examining why and how we are examining. Examining has a connotation of operating on what is to be perceived, that we might be trying to reshape reality. Reality might also be trying to reshape us, but ultimately we don't really have to do anything to maintain the whole thing. We are always stuck in the middle no matter what we do, so demystification means not taking that for granted. Our tendency is always to be busy. But behind the busyness, there is no particular point. Similarly, our tendency is also always to be lazy. We don't make any effort unless we are certain it will be for our benefit, no matter how illogical or self-destructive the action might be. We are impatient, but also uncertain. A problem with many spiritual disciplines is that we add a layer of abstraction obscuring the basic process. We want to solve the problem, but we are ignoring the fact that it is we who stated it as a problem. All sorts of things are happening which we may or may not want to have happen. Presumably, we want to control the situation such that only things that we want to happen do happen. This is the problem that we perpetually try to solve without ever truly being successful. It is not immediately noticed why this is always the case. We begin to become skeptical in our situation. Usually that is the beginning. Doubt. We begin to realize that our way of operating leaves too many loose ends. You can see this in your living space. It is constantly in a state of progressive disorder from your actions. However, it is also constantly being brought back into order by your actions. Nobody else is doing it except you. It is also the case that it is never in a state of completion. It is never wholly satisfactory. Visual is seeing this whole process. Your experience is necessarily a personal commitment, but you cannot extricate yourself from it. So you have to live with that. Use that as an inspiration. Since there is no way out of it, we are encouraged to not add to it unnecessarily. This is the process of demystification. We don't actually stay the same, but we begin to divest ourselves, to experience some vulnerability. We can be wrong. It isn't a problem. We can deal with the fact that we have harmed people. We can get beyond the psychological mire. In that way, we can know vision. We can see. We can feel, be touched, hear, taste, and smell. That could be our guide, just being whatever we are. Individuality. Individuality is an abstraction. You cannot really say that you have experienced individuality. Nevertheless, you cannot really take a holiday from yourself either. Formless, individuality is the foundation of appearances. There is no effort involved in individuality, undivided duality. It is whether you care to notice it or not. The fact is, we don't really know who we are. We believe we are. We don't really know how this comes about, or its fate for that matter, or if there is a fate. Without the crutch of identity, the constant cues that remind us to be something or other, what are we? Being something is inherently unsatisfying, stale yet enticing. We cannot leave it alone. Like mildew, habits build up and they stick tenaciously to an impenetrable surface. Individuality is a dead end. It's a hard end. You cannot hope to pose any questions about individuality. At the same time, nothing is precluded. Everything is made possible in this empty arena. You cannot even say that you are alone. There is nothing to give up in the end. Discipline is foolishness. Nothing is lost or achieved. However, in this absence, communication becomes possible. There are sensations, thoughts, interactions. Situations arise pristine in precision and clarity, inescapable, a sharp chill, clean and sure in the silence. Realizing individuality means not dwelling on the mind. What happens, happens. Your search looks in the wrong direction precisely because it is a search. By giving up searching, by giving up relief, individuality is immediately apparent. There is no trick to individuality or exclusivity. It is immediately apparent. There is no trick to individuality or exclusivity. It is the ultimate occult teaching, which is available to anyone, anytime. It is shock and familiarity at once. To realize individuality engenders tremendous confidence. You could say that not having anything to hang on to is a tremendous source of energy and inspiration. A quality of panic that makes you continually appreciate what you are. There is no way to develop individuality. It is a constant. Individuality is neither created nor destroyed. We recognize individuality to various degrees depending on our willingness to do so. Like infinity, individuality is readily recognized but recedes from our grasp, our willingness or unwillingness to relate to individuality being equal. We are forced to come to terms with our snobbery, our lack of generosity, our inhibitions and holding back. There is no other way. We simply wear ourselves out with the whole thing. We are reminded not to take what we are too seriously. Individuality, the essence of ritual, is ultimately no achievement, timelessness in timeless change. Intention. Despite its basic simplicity, intention is a very difficult point. It seems to take a lot of work to come to terms with. Normally, we build on our experiences. Intention encourages us to work with the experience itself. Without intention, we are only reacting without an overall understanding of the process of our experience. To live intentionally does not mean particularly having a defined plan in place at every moment. Rather, it is a state of continual accuracy in all of our actions. Accuracy comes from two things: clear perception and uninhibited action. These two are linked and in fact are not really different. Clear perception is realizing without hesitation, and uninhibited action is the response, giving back without hesitation. We are acting in experience, not on it. Hesitation is the perception that your security is being threatened in some way. In order to really give and take, you need to give up security and accept the situation you are in as it is. Editor's note, chiming in. I'm going to reproof that sentence because it's important, and then I'll go on. In order to really give and take, you need to give up security and accept the situation you are in as it is. Engaging in outrageous actions, however, is not necessarily giving up security. If you are without expectation, attempting to define yourself in some way is irrelevant. Similarly, without hesitation, you can take responsibility for any situation. The normal concern over blame is no longer important. You simply take things at face value. Responsibility also means taking initiative. You do not need to follow precedent. What needs to happen is clear immediately. Frequently, the straightforward route causes discomfort. It seems to focus attention on the basis of our anxiety, what we are trying to hide. The effect can be one of a rude awakening. It is necessary to experience our anxiety and discomfort and not try to gloss it over or shovel it under the carpet with technique. For this reason, it is necessary not to blame others for our discomfort. Instead, we could be grateful that we are being reminded of it. By being reminded of it, we are able to work with it. The whole point is to notice it first before doing anything with it. Then one simply learns not to refer to it. Intention lets you get into the groundlessness of your experience. There is no hidden maneuvering or agenda. It's quite simple. You want what you want, but it is not really necessary at the same time. You can drop it because you see that it is groundless. Intention obviously applies in all areas of existence, and not just in ritual. It is what makes ritual ritual. Through intention, you can see that ritual is not necessarily a specific time, place, or circumstance, but rather your relation with that time, place, and circumstance. Intention is not an attempt at gaining control, but rather points out the essential needlessness of the game in the first place. Ritual. Without ritual, TOPY could not exist. Ritual is much more than working with any specific practice. It enables a complete and coherent response to our experience. Ritual allows us to know the total integration of our experience as it is. It provides a bridge between confusion and certainty. Ritual must be approached with care. It must be followed through thoroughly and completely. If you are piercing yourself, you know that halfway through you can't say, "Oh, I guess I won't go through with it." It's the same situation in our daily existence. By not taking care or following through, we continually pay the price of haste. We tend to see problems as being inflicted on us from without. Similarly, we also seek salvation outside of ourselves. Being effectively reciprocal, suffering and relief are intimately linked. Techniques that work tend to make us more aware of our pain, and particularly our role in it. They show us that looking elsewhere for satisfaction is fruitless. Eventually, we have to take responsibility for the difficulties we experience and not expect to be rescued from them. To really get into experiences, we have to let pleasure and pain happen in their own way. Thus, in order to really get into pleasure, we must acknowledge pain. What prevents us from experiencing pleasure is fear. We anticipate pain. Similarly, we try to shield ourselves from pain with hope, the anticipation of pleasure. To develop clarity, we need to give up our expectations about pain and pleasure in a fundamental way. Otherwise, they will constantly lead us astray. Editor's note. Hedonism. Continuing. By working with a structured approach, we have some way to work with the raw material of our experience. However, adopting a certain approach does not guarantee expected results. We have to take the chance that we are on the wrong track. Because we approach any technique with expectations, we are inevitably going to be disappointed by it. Perhaps the function of technique is not just to be successful, but also to make us question our motivations and assumptions about it. We are very much part of the structured approach of technique. That we take a proper approach to technique is vastly more important than any technique we might investigate. With a structured approach, even if the technique is flawed, it should be clear what is going on. Without it, results will be random at best. Apart from what the source of or tradition of the technique brings to the technique, what we bring to the technique consists of two parts. The first part is willingness to do the technique. There is a major stumbling block for most of us. That is a major stumbling block for most of us. We would rather speculate about what we don't know than have to get into it and possibly make a mess. The second part is that once we have thoroughly worked with the technique, we need to evaluate what we are doing. It is necessary to give up the idea of searching for a reward in everything. Not everything works. Whether something works as expected or whether we want to continue with a certain approach is not the important point. Rather, we need to clearly see where we are going with it. Otherwise, our approach will become superstitious poison. Working with technique requires both a willingness to surrender as well as critical intellect. Without both of those, we are prone to self-deception. Knowing our role in any success or failure we experience is an important point. Our disappointments are a reminder not to take what we are doing too seriously. If we have taken a wrong approach to a certain technique, we should acknowledge it. We can't blame the chair we tripped over for the sore toe. Similarly, it is not particularly productive to dwell on our success either. We adopt techniques on the basis of other people's experience. Without that experience and generosity, we would get nowhere. Ritual is not limited to technique. Technique is only an entry point, a way to get into experiences. Inevitably, technique becomes extraneous. Technique for its own sake is an obstacle. There is always a danger of using what we are doing as a way to emphasize our exclusivity. Although we are always subject to other people's prejudices to some degree, we do not benefit from exaggerating that prejudice. It is not necessary to concern ourselves with whether or not a given situation or tradition fits in with our own or another's preconceptions of what is proper behavior. In actuality, we are subject to the same deception and prejudice as anybody else. Without deception, we would never have been inspired to work on ourselves in the first place. If everything's okay, why bother? The fact that we want to work on ourselves is just an inevitable part of the process of pain that everybody experiences in one way or another. There's nothing special about that at all. Thus, what we are doing, whether it is accepted or not, is not particularly a cause for self-absorption or arrogance. We need to let ritual permeate our whole life. When we are willing to give ourselves to it wholeheartedly, pain and pleasure become an ornament, both personal and ageless. There is nothing mysterious about ritual. By relating with our experience in a straightforward way, ritual is invoked immediately, anytime, anywhere. It's an open invitation. Levels of meaning in the TOPY. The sigil is the result. That is the basic premise. When your whole life becomes ritual, then there is no distinction between procedure and result. Despite its seemingly arbitrary appearance in 1981, TOPY has a highly organized and self-consistent structure. This structure may not be so obvious to the casual observer. In fact, the early documents at TOPY appear to be somewhat incomplete. The purpose of this writing is to attempt to increase the understanding of the underpinnings and implications of TOPY so that individuals who wish to use the methods of intuitive magic may do so with greater clarity of purpose. 4 points seem to make up this whole: ritual, intention, demystification, and individuality. These create a self-contained structure of interdependence. Each relies upon the other. From these 4 points, different links may be inferred. The goal of sigilization is the coordination and eventual integration of various levels of awareness that are frequently in conflict. We need to connect with other possibilities of awareness apart from the apparently mundane consciousness that we are generally familiar with. That this consciousness is not so straightforward and mundane is the starting point for this natural process of discovery. Much of the process of sigilization could be properly summed up as the development of perspective. We begin to be able to discern the features of different states of awareness. In addition to these intuitively observed states, there is the functional architecture of the brain itself. This has a special significance in the symbolism and structure of TOPY. Ritual is the concrete expression of experience. It is the foundation of awareness from which the other points are abstracted. Whether we are aware of it or not, we are always working on this level. Much difficulty is caused by the fact that we do not consciously acknowledge this under normal circumstances. Instead of working with our experience in a straightforward way, we invoke superstition and mystification, in many instances without realizing it. Ritual naturally evolves towards intention. Intention represents the state of complete self-acceptance and self-awareness. This state of equanimity is silence. From it, the richness of expression is apparent. Ultimately, there is no distinction of passivity or activity. One is able to work effortlessly and continually. Intention is the panoramic experience of the process of ritual. Demystification begins with the process of doubt. It is a way of discernment. We need to know why. Demystification is the working of ritual over time. We work with ritual to find out. The critical quality of demystification is necessary if we are to develop accurate understanding. Demystification evolves naturally to individuality. Individuality is the primal experience of awareness before perception. It is the basic riddle of experience and the end of all questions. We just have to get into experiences. We cannot hope to codify or prepare them. Looking at these 4 points from the perspective of space and time, we can see the connection between the timeliness of ritual and the timelessness of intention. From space-time, we abstract both process, demystification, and being, individuality. In demystification, there is an ongoing sense of working with experience. In individuality, there is an ongoing sense of working with experience. In individuality, there is a sense of constancy and immutability. These qualities evolve naturally from the experience of ritual. Demystification suggests that situations are knowable. Individuality suggests that they are beyond knowing. Intention, the coordination factor in the puzzle, evolves from the combined intelligence of knowing and not knowing. The fickleness of time and the immutability of space are negated. One is perfectly coordinated in space and time and space, free in one's expression. Demystification and individuality provide a mirror, the axis of precision, from which the meaning behind the experience is made more apparent. We begin to appreciate our experience more and begin to take more care in how we work with it. Similarly, ritual and intention provide a mirror of our questions, the axis of openness in which we know the equality of knowing and not knowing. The 4 points of demystification, individuality, ritual, intention, form an interdependent and self-referential whole. They do not point to any outside cause for their operation. Thus, any experience is self-contained. We are not particularly under attack or being congratulated by any outside influence. We do not know the final direction of experience. It happens. Being both cause and effect, we work with it as it happens. Editor's note. I'm hoping that you all noticed the kind of coherence and interrelationship between those different sections. There's a forward and backwardness to it. They fit into one another in a symmetrical way. So bear that in mind going forward. Moving on. Sigilization and the brain. Sigilization is particularly concerned with the control and operation of the limbic system. The limbic system provides the functional ability to experience emotion. It is also important in the formation of long-term memory. It could be thought of as a fulcrum between the cerebral cortex and the autonomic areas of the brain, which, among other things, controls sleep and sexual response. The brain, while composed of many subsystems, is a functional unit. Sigilization is one technique that can reorganize the brain into a more coherent state of function. In the sigil, one sees the various functional areas of the brain symbolized. OV is the autonomic brain, blood and spit, the limbic system. The sigil paper is the cerebral cortex. The purpose of the sigil is to connect the cerebral cortex with the so-called lower areas of the brain. The coordination of mental and bodily sensations is the primary purpose of the sigil. The limbic system assigns the weights of bodily and mental experiences. That is, it is critical whether you are aware of a certain aspect of your experience. In various eating disorders, for example, the weight of the bodily sensation of hunger changes to an abnormal level, from being driven from consciousness in anorexia to being the main focus of attention in bulimia. The intended effect of the sigil is to balance the relative weights of bodily and mental sensations, heightening both. The subsequent release provides the impetus for the working of the sigil. While the content of the sigil might be subliminal, the medium of sensation that carries the context is not. The balance of the sigil also follows a horizontal axis in addition to the vertical axis described above. Right hemisphere, intuition, is individuality. Left hemisphere, planning, is ritual. Corpus callosum, connection, is demystification. The effect of sigilization, integration, is intention. Perhaps the accommodation of desire performed by the sigil is like the sweet taste of an apple. The apple is sweet so that you will eat it and distribute its seed. The apple merely produces seed. The sigil produces balance. If the sigil works, then we are encouraged to continue with the process of sigilization, which in turn produces even more balance. Not grasping this point can cause problems. If we try to force situations too much, there's a tendency for a backlash to occur. There's nothing mysterious about this. We simply stop paying attention to what we are doing. This negates any positive effect of the sigilization process. By realizing the self-contained, self-actualizing nature of experience, what we mean by ritual, such mistakes will become less frequent. Sigilization is not the only method for working with the basic principles of TOPOI. Other methods do apply and can augment or replace the practice of sigilization. The question is in understanding the underlying logic of your situation. You need to decide if sigilization is appropriate. In a way, this is impossible to do. To really know what it is, you need to work with it on a practical level. It is very much a personal decision. Success reflects more your willingness to work with your experience than any particular result or reward. That you are rewarded by the process is a side effect of the process itself. By developing insight, what we want naturally changes. We change and grow as human beings. This naturally encourages us to focus the direction of our energies towards working on ourselves. Will is not ultimately what is referred to by the expression, quote-unquote, willpower. Will is release, the positive expression of energy. You simply let go of that which holds you back. Will is the natural result. The Emperor's Clothes. Self could be said to be the buildup of memory. It is an identity that you are familiar and comfortable with at any given moment. Normally, we have two beliefs about the self. One, it is distinct, and two, it is singular. We have a sense of self as distinct because we believe that we exist amongst other similar but dissimilar beings. We can say that we are not another because of our experience of the other. The difficulty with the other is that we never really experience it. We are always involved in our particular point of view. If we suddenly took on another's point of view, there would still be one point of view. We have to admit that other exists only as a convention. We use this concept or intuition to navigate around in the world where various perceptions exist in similar or dissimilar states. Without any evidence to distinguish more than one point of view, self is impossible to determine. That self is distinct is a fundamental belief without which the whole experience of self will fall apart. In its stead, we have to consider that self and not self are indistinguishable. The singularity of self is a theory we create based on our belief in a distinguishable self. By singularity, I do not mean a single irreducible self, but a consistent self-image or set of self-images that occur on a continual basis. This theory of self tries to set up various emotional experiences for itself and then evaluates those experiences for success. The sense of success feeds back into the system as it itself is emotion. Emotion is a sense of energy or change in the system of self. Emotion, however, is not in itself a theory of self and exists interdependently of the self's self-image. Ironically, emotions, which provide the means for the creation of self, are also the means of its destruction. Singularity implies permanence, which is in conflict with the capriciousness of emotion. Working with magic, we need to be realistic and be willing to discard that which is unnecessary. If we believe magic is the exercise of intention, any reliance on self-deception puts us on shaky foundations. If self is indeterminate, then we must modify our magical work to accommodate this fact. The question remains, isn't magic just irrelevant without the self? Perhaps we need to give it up entirely, or not even start from scratch. Whether this affects our actual practice is another matter. We are reminded of our non-existence from working with concrete situations. We cannot really abandon the fact that we exist in a concrete perceptual world. Working without reference to self cannot occur without a living experience to the ephemeral nature of the self. To accomplish this, we need to work with awareness itself in some fundamental way. We have excluded awareness from our working if we rely on a notion of self. Self is any predefined id, identity, or goal. If we have a goal, whether or not we achieve it will be the same, since we have not dared to ask the fundamental question. Magic that does not invoke the self, search for a higher purpose, or attempt to solidify itself in achievements is a radically different thing from what most of us might consider to be normal magical practice. But if we examine what we actually do in our practice, we can see that this possibility does spontaneously crop up even if it is ignored. Usually we look for the extraordinary to distract us from the fact that we are not really doing anything. If you are dreaming that you are naked, you believe that you are naked, but you do not believe you are dreaming. Working without the self is to see that you are dreaming as well, at least that it is the beginning. Knowing that you are dreaming may not change the contents of the dream, but it may radically change the character of the dream. By knowing that you are dreaming, you are free to give up the idea of being a fixed character in the dream. While we might feel that we do not have the same freedom in our waking situation, and in a sense the main purpose of magic is to unite the waking and dreaming states, the same possibility applies. It applies because waking in the dream is a state of awareness. Anything we do to invoke it is merely a provocation of awareness. Since awareness applies to any state of mind, since we cannot escape mind for even a second, the same logic applies. We can be in on the joke any time we wish. Magic without self is both work and play simultaneously, both pain and pleasure. We work directly with the raw materials in this case. TOPY is in a unique position because of our lack of tradition. It is easier to discard any unnecessary accoutrement to our magical work. Really, the whole thing is a question of interpretation. What do you believe you are doing? Coyote 37. Break. Continuing. Constructing the cross. Speculations about a few ambiguous details. Life is like an investigation, almost a detective story, whose mystery we never manage to unravel. The theories formulated, often invalidated, never turn out to be true. At best, we remain hopeful. Their nature is always to be hypothetical, and in the end, simply spiritual points of view. We should also admit, however, that this is the essence of the pleasure of living. We should never confuse speculation with reality, but on the contrary admit that we are condemned to take our pleasure from that difference. The common denominator. Through the medium of Throbbing Gristle and through that of Psychic TV, in the various texts, Genesis P-Orridge talks to us of his fascination for the figure, quote-unquote, 3. Coming as we do from a Christian culture, we think first of all of the Holy Trinity. But in all times and all places, this number has had preponderant and symbolic value. It can designate the spirit, the soul, and the body, or again, still according to Kabbalah, the subject, the verb, and the object. For others, it represents the phases of existence, birth, growth, death. For Georges Demoiselle, society itself is tripartite, the priest, the warrior, and the producer. Alchemy would take it to have it 3 ways, humidity, dry, and royal, and astrology 3 phases, evolution, culmination, and involution, quote-unquote, descending. The title given to the concert 1 year after the fact by Genesis P-Orridge. Such delay for reflection can only indicate an extreme significance. For personal reasons, this descent incites me to think of the fall. It can be seen at the top of the poster made for the concert. CF, the single Roman P, and ineluctably falls back. Those who are under, or those who place themselves under, the sign of water are condemned to the cycle of eternal return. But it must also be noted that the 1st of June, 1984, the evening of the concert, happened to be the day following that of Ascension, a religious fest and holiday celebrated in France. Christ having ascended into the heavens, this descent would therefore designate the fall of the fallen angels towards hell and its underworlds. Who would be surprised? Has not Genesis P-Orridge already used letter paper decorated with his own portrait representing himself as the devil or Satan? Finally, there is the cross with the 3 horizontal branches, the omnipresent symbol of the group Psychic TV. Such crosses are rare and seldom used. The only one that I know of is the quote-unquote papal cross, whose characteristic is to have a central branch longer than the 2 others. The one worn by Psychic TV would thus be the central branch, thus being shorter than the 2 others in quote-unquote anti-papal cross. The insistence with which this cross is not only reproduced but also highlighted underlines its symbolic importance. The highlighting culminates with the image of the cross in flames, filmed on video at extreme length, a reference, albeit an obvious one, to the megalomaniac rituals of the KKK, once again the number 3, but which should not eclipse the fire itself, a vital and primordial symbol, if ever there was one. If we imagine that the median axis of the cross, the symbol of psychic TV, divides it into two symmetrical parts, and if we consider only the left part, we see the figure 3 appears, a peculiarity that logically brings us to reconsider the right part with equal interest. The symmetrical equivalent of 3 turns out to be the letter E. E as an energy, which is what comes to mind first of all. But the symbolism of the letters takes us back to the ancient Greeks, to the Greco-Roman mythologies. The E designates the goddess Vesta, Hestia in Greek, beginning with the letter epsilon, corresponding to Re. She is fire by principal energy in its purest form. It is the fire of Hestia that mystic visionaries feel burning in their bones. Emmanuel, Highlights of Ancient Greece, 1963. By extension, she is also the goddess of the home. In the letter E, onto the vertical line designated the flame, is attached the father for the highest line, the mother for the lowest, and the child for the median. The family has become the capital theme of the life of Genesis P-Orridge, as much on the personal level as that of the public by means of psychic TV in the Temple of Psychic Youth. It is not unreasonable to remember the fascination of Genesis P-Orridge with the Manson family. As in all other primordial symbols, fire is ambivalent. Its origins are equally as divine as demonic, representing spiritual growth, the rising flame which mounts and illuminates, as much as psychic regression, the underground fire crawling and consuming. The symmetrical symbol of water is, however, of the same nature, since both have purifying virtues. Do not let us give in to the contemporary habits and consider these symmetries as being oppositions. Let us rather see them, as in the times of the Greco-Roman paganism, as complementary. The fire in mythology, in another incarnation than that of Vesta, we find associated with Vulcan, which, in agreement with Jean Hobb in the Alphabet of the Gods, we shall write as Vulcan with a W, thus associating it with the letter symbol W. As a preliminary, we shall note that this W is obtained by a 90-degree rotation to the left of the letter E. Vulcan is the underground fire, that is the forge, close to hell. It therefore indicates metal, which has for all time been associated with the idea of magic. Psychic TV introduces the symbol of metal, essentially in 3 forms. Once again, that same number. 1, the knife, obviously a phallic active instrument introducing the idea of sacrifice. It marks the flesh of the initiate into the Temple of Psychic Youth with 3 horizontal slashes. 2, the bracelets of copper, feminine symbols clasping the wrist. The fist is a symbol of power. Incidentally, copper designates Venus. 3, the metal rings used for piercing, as much to decorate as to prevent the open flesh from closing up. This meeting of flesh, sex, and metal is in no way surprising for those who know the theories of Jung relating metals to sexual desire, to the libido. The hidden message of piercing is highly troubling and mysterious. What is to be thought of this masculine sex piercing by a ring, the feminine symbol? The desire for the feminine sex to become penetrator, and the phallus the penetrated? The desire not for castration, but for reunification? The theme of fire in itself is unavoidably linked with that of sexuality, the fire obtained by rubbing, sexuality constituting the psychic binder of PTV. The W designated Vulcan if we take the symmetrical point, or if we make a rotation of 90 degrees to the right of the letter E. The letter M is thus created, which designates Mercury, Hermes. With the M, we arrive at the ultimate stage of this journey towards the letters presiding over the existence of PTV and its destiny. The most hidden of them, in fact, turns out to be the most important. Its action, though essentially occult, consists in linking the other letters together. Mercury, the god of messengers, the god of discovery, the god of synthesis. He permits the perfect conciliation between these fundamental themes of metal, water, the liquid element, and fire. Mercury, the sperm of metals, as it is designated by the Freemasons' Catechism of 1766, the flaming star by Baron de Chaudet, a liquid metal presiding over all mutations, over the union of all opposites. Mercury, the winged god, is also the bearer of the caduceus wand, whose 2 entwined snakes symbolize the Dionysian synthesis of symmetric principles, good and evil, fire and water, diurnal and nocturnal, masculine and feminine, at last reunited. It is Mercury represented, such as St. Christopher, making Agni the god of fire for the Indians cross the water. It is Hermes, psychopomp, accompanying the dead from the world of the living towards that of the shades. Hermes Trismegistus, thrice great, the founder of alchemy, he who possesses the three ministries, he who dominates the body, the soul, and the spirit. Jean Hobb, The Alphabet of the Gods, 1979. This chemical Mercury, sometimes represented in the form of a wolf holding a lamb, the philosopher's stone in its mouth, thus bringing us back in such a forceful way to this other recurrent theme of psychic TV. O great Mercury of the wise ones, in you it is unified, silver and gold, drawn from power alive. Mercury, all sun, all moon, triple substance in one. Unity which shows itself to be triple, O sublime wonder. Mercury, sulfur, and salt. You teach me that in three substances you are only one. Marc Antonio Castellani, translated from the Italian under the title Light Revealing Itself from the Shadows by the Baron de Chaudet, 1766. Finally, Mercury allows us to evoke Venus once again. Compare with the next text accompanying the Psychic TV single Roman P. From the encounter between these two divinities, Hermes and Aphrodite, was born Hermaphroditus, the androgynous, having at the same time the feminine and masculine sexual attributes. Indifferent to its monstrosity, the hermaphrodite has gradually become a savior who masters conflicts. During the course of the evolution of civilization, the original bisexual being has become the symbol of the unity of the personality, of the oneness, in which the conflict of the constants has managed to calm itself. In this way, the original being, already being from the beginning a protection of the unconscious entity, has become the far-off goal of the realization of oneself, of the human essence. Carl Jung, Contribution to the Psychology of the Infant Archetype, 1941. Mercury, the god of Hermetic science, but also that of hermeneutics, the god allowing us to solve the problem of trying to square the circle. Jean-Pierre Turmel, Rouen, August 15 through 25, 1985, translated by Malcolm Duff. Thus concludes today's reading. Tomorrow we'll continue with the Black Book. Editor's note: I don't think I will be reading that much per day anymore because I wish to keep your attention. But it was very important to contain that entire lesson within one piece. Bear that in mind going forward. Have a good day.